What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB and welcome to the Awesome MTB Trail Bike Buyer's Guide. What's up you guys, Mo Awesome from Awesome MTB and welcome back to our Trail Bike Buyer's Guide. Over the last few months, we've been testing out 11 of the best trail bikes on the market. Now these are 29ers with about 140 to 150 millimeters of travel, and even though there's 11 bikes in this test, we honestly think that each one of these bikes has a unique personality and is going to be suited to a different rider. So the goal of this series is to break down each one of these bikes and give you guys the information to make an informed decision on your next bike purchase. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the Rocky Mountain Instinct and giving you guys our review of this bike and telling you guys who this bike is for. Now let's talk a little bit about the Rocky Mountain Instinct. The Instinct is coming all the way from BC and it has 140 millimeters of rear travel, 150 millimeters of front travel, and it's probably one of the most customizable bikes in this test. It comes with reach adjust in the headset, so you actually have plus or minus 5 millimeters of reach adjust. You also have a chainstay adjustment, so you can actually adjust the chainstay about 10 millimeters from 440 to 450. And it also comes with 4 different geo positions with the Ride 4 chip. Now the bike we reviewed is the Rocky Mountain C70 build. This is actually a size extra large. I'm 6'2" for reference and this thing fit me perfectly. Up front we have a Fox 36 Performance Elite with a Grip 2 dampener, and in the rear we have a Fox Float X rear shock. For the drivetrain, we have a Shimano XT 1x12 drivetrain. For brakes, we have Shimano XT brakes. For handlebars, we have Rocky Mountain's own carbon handlebars. We have a race face dropper post with a WTB saddle. We're running our tried and true Crank Brothers Stamp 7 pedals in a size large. For wheels, we have Race Face's alloy wheel set with a Minion DHF tire up front, and we're running a Maxxis Dissector tire in the rear. Now the Rocky Mountain Instinct does feature internal frame storage. This build itself is actually coming in at a very respectable weight of about 31.88 pounds, so under 32 pounds. And once again, that is the C70 build. Now in the description of the video, we're actually going to link this entire build as well as how I personally would build this bike up. And we're going to touch on our thoughts on the actual builds of these bikes. However, let's go for a quick ride on this bike and then break down how the Instinct performed on the trails. All right, you guys, another review today on trail with the Rocky Mountain Instinct. This is a bike that has a special place in my heart, because this last trip to BC, we became friends with Wade Simmons, the godfather of freeride. And I have to say, every time I ride this bike, I think of him. And this is the slow chunk part of our test, a part that I think the Rocky Mountain Instinct, man, is probably one of the most interesting of the bikes in the test. I would say if you've ever watched an old school freeride movie, this bike gives you this kind of weird sense of delusion that you could do some of those lines. It's so composed in slow speed chunk, and the traction that the Rocky Mountain suspension platform provides is pretty insane. It just makes you want to raise the rear end of the bike up and really just huck off of things. And I love the composure when you land. You know, the same could be said for the climbs. The traction on tech climbs is pretty insane, and you can tell this bike comes from a land where the roots are plentiful and also very wet most of the year, because this thing feels like it has traction control on when you go up techie bits, but at the same time too has a very good pedaling platform when there's not too much tech around. And I feel like that's where the magical Rocky Mountain suspension design platform comes in. This, I said it in the Slayer review, that bike was 180 millimeters of travel. However, when you didn't want it to be 180, it didn't feel that way. It felt like it had a much better pedaling platform than you would think a bike of that caliber has. Same thing with this. Now we have a little bit of high speed action with Rocket. And this is where things get even more interesting. Like I said, the suspension design on the Rocky, very active over the chunk. However, it still has that playful feeling of a trail bike, which is really awesome to feel. The other thing that it has that's really cool is so much adjustments. I actually have it with the longer reach, and I have really been enjoying playing around with different reach positions on the same size frame bike, something that I wish more bikes would have. Through the chunk over there, super stable. Now picking our way through, very precise in its handling, way more so than the 64-ish degree head angle would lead you to believe. And then we have technical climbing here, which once again, you guys, I'm totally feeling like I'm in Canada while riding the Rocky. It's just one of those bikes that after meeting Wade Simmons, I feel like the bikes make so much sense. They make bikes they want to ride. Of hooking up in and out of corners, this thing stays glued like rails, but you can push off and generate some speed, which is really rad and I think helpful for more of those North Shore moves. Try to generate some speed here. That little extra pop you want when you want to get the bike airborne. It's so easy to get up in the air and then land very planted. And I think that sums up what Rocky Mountain is trying to achieve with a bike. Fun fact, well, two fun facts. Number one, this is the most technical trail of the GoPro video, car wreck. Number two, this is the second time I'm doing this right now because the first time I forgot to hit record. Saying about this bike, as you guys can tell right there, there's so much control when things get steep and gnarly. I'm definitely blown away, and also been super stoked on the opportunity to ride certain trails that I might have been kind of wary of before with so much control. I feel like this really is a free rider's trail bike, and it feels amazing. Coming in through here, I've been saying this a lot, but you guys can see on camera, it's very slick over hard pack, and traction is super important. The Rocky definitely performs at the higher end of the test in terms of traction over loose. And I just love how planted to the ground this bike feels. Coming into here, this is where we really want to focus, but I feel like this is the bike for this section. And I'm actually going to make it a little spicier. I'm going to take high line through the chunk. Okay, nice and in control through here. Nice. Such a freaking perfect bike for this type of terrain. How's it going, guys? Sick. So much control. That is probably the most control I felt throughout the test through that chunk. And I just feel like this bike just has this weird ability to make anything steep and technical easier because you have the ability to navigate it when you're freaking out there, which is awesome. If I had to summarize this bike, I would say this is gonna be a technical rider's dream trail bike. You can definitely tell that Rocky Mountain stayed true to its roots, literally roots, because they went with a little bit more of an active suspension approach while retaining a very poppy, playful feel out on the trails. It's a very good combination of both worlds. So starting off with things that we loved about the Rocky Mountain Instinct, the first thing is gonna be traction. It's very clear that Rocky Mountain's priorities come through traction. And after spending so much time in British Columbia earlier this year, it was very apparent that trails out there required a very active approach to suspension. There's so many roots and rocks, and especially when you're jumping into roots and rocks, that's definitely when you want your bike to be most planted. And the Rocky Mountain suspension line definitely has a fairly active initial stroke, which was very appreciated on chunkier terrain. Now, the cool thing is that Rocky Mountain balances that active approach to suspension with that playful feeling you still need out on the trails. In and out of corners, this thing still has a very good pop to it. You definitely notice on more steep technical sections of trails, you're still able to kind of jump the bike off the trail and into the next section when you want to. That's a classic BC move. There's so many trails out there in British Columbia where you're crawling down the steep technical section and then all of a sudden you need to either jump in the next section or gap the next section. Yeah, this bike still has a very playful feeling while remaining very active on initial compression. Another thing that I absolutely love about the Rocky Mountain Instinct is the customization. This is going to be one of of the most customizable bikes in this test. Once again, you have reach adjust up front, so you can change the reach plus or minus 5 millimeters. You have a chainstay adjustment of about 10 millimeters, so you can go from 440 to 450. And it's interesting because this is one of the few bikes with a rear chainstay adjustment, and I actually think that rear chainstay adjustment is probably the adjustment I prefer the most. And on top of that, you have Rocky Mountain's Ride 4, and that's been so awesome being able to play around with because you can go 4 different positions and they actually make a difference. You can go all the way steep or all the way slack, and then you have 2 neutral positions in between. Really awesome to have that slack for bike park time or if I'm doing shuttles. And it's also nice to have that steeper setting if you're gonna be riding more desert terrain like Moab or Sedona and you want a little bit more precision in your line choice. Another thing that I love about this bike is how it climbs. Once again, you guys, this bike definitely has a little bit more of an active suspension design, which makes technical climbs handled with ease. So yeah, I love that about this bike. And it also has a very balanced nature. The bike does have a little bit longer chainstays than other bikes in this test, and it can go even longer in that long mode in that rear chainstay. And that gives you a very planted feeling on climb. Another thing that I love about this bike is the bike's weight. When I first saw the build kit, I wasn't sure how the bike was gonna weigh when we put it on the scale. This once again is the C70 build, so there's a couple of tiers above it. However, this bike is sub 32, and that's actually a very competitive weight in today's trail bike standards. Now let's talk about some stuff that I didn't necessarily love about the Rocky Mountain Instinct. I would say if you're a rider out there that's trying to prioritize efficiency, once again, I do think that Rocky Mountain bikes definitely prioritize traction. So in terms of actual pedaling efficiency, when you're out of the saddle putting the power down, you might find some of the other bikes in this buyer's guide to be a little bit more up your alley there. So who's the Rocky Mountain Instinct for? Now, this is actually gonna be one of those broad range answers just because there's so much adjustability, so I feel like you can really fine tune the geo to the terrain that you're gonna be riding. Now, I will say, if you're a rider out there that maybe rides a little bit more smoother terrain, you're looking for something a little bit more poppy, playful, and on the less aggressive side, I don't necessarily think you're gonna benefit from the Rocky Mountain Instinct. I feel like the Rocky Mountain Instinct rewards a technical rider that wants to maximize traction and maybe likes riding more rugged terrain like Moab or BC, and definitely wants to make sure that they have traction optimized on the technical descents, but they still want a playful feel from the bike. If you guys ever make your way up to British Columbia and you ride the North Shore, this is gonna be that perfect North Shore bike where you're gonna be able to go for all day rides, but at the same time know that your bike is not gonna be holding you back when it comes time for the descents. And I can definitely see a lot of riders out there who prefer more technical terrain loving this bike. Now, in regards to the actual build and what we loved and didn't love about it, I actually think I would prefer a Grip X2 dampener in the fork. However, I do love that rear shock, the Fox Float X, so I would keep that. The drivetrain, I haven't been necessarily the biggest fan of the Shimano XT. I do find it to be a little bit on the louder side and not as smooth shifting as something like Transmission or even XTR. The XT brakes are tried and true and very reliable. Race face drop post doesn't feel as smooth as I would want it. I really do like these carbon bars. And I also love the internal frame storage, and I like the 2 pouch that comes with it. So that's a review of the Rocky Mountain Instinct. How did it do in comparison to the other bikes in this test? You guys are gonna have to stay tuned to the conclusion of this video series. If you guys have any questions about the Rocky Mountain Instinct that we didn't answer in this video, let us know in the comment section. We're happy to help. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss out on any other video from this series. And until next time, you guys, ride awesome. You.